welcome back to the Intersection South by East fans. And today, man, John, you brought this tweet to me. This is really good. We're talking about dropping the degrees. I like this. It says this here. Good news for 2024. Several notable corporations, including Bank of America, Dell, and Delta Airlines, have made the decision to remove degree requirements for a significant portion of their workforce. Their shift in hiring practices reflects a growing recognition that a formal degree may not always be the best indicator of an individual's skills and potential. In the field of information technology, companies like IBM and Accenture have also adjusted their approach. IBM now requires degrees for only 29% of their IT jobs, while Accenture requires degrees for 43% of their IT positions. By reevaluating the necessity of a degree, these companies are opening up opportunities for individuals with diverse backgrounds and experiences, acknowledging that skills and practical knowledge can be gained through alternative paths. This shift in hiring practices not only promotes inclusivity, but also allows companies to tap into a wider talent pool, potentially bringing in individuals with unique perspectives and innovative ideas. It signifies a recognition that skills and capabilities can be acquired through various means, such as self-study, vocational training, or hands-on experience. Overall, these corporations are leading the way in redefining traditional hiring practices, emphasizing skills and potential over formal degrees. This approach not only benefits individuals who may have been previously overlooked, but also contributes to a more diverse and dynamic workforce. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can see this beneficial in a couple of ways. In my first job, I worked for the second largest chemical company in the world. And I had a friend who started out as a admin intern. Admin intern. Like, so not even a full admin intern. She went to school, got her degree in administration, started doing some stuff around admin, but then she was a really zealful person. And so she continued to go to school, and while she was working still at all this time, she started doing projects with people who had degrees and different things of that nature. She ended up continuing her education, going to get the degrees to do that. And this company that she had been a part of for all this long time would not allow her to transfer over to actually start doing the job that she had always been doing, that before that point, the degree had been the issue. But then they said, well, we can't give you that big of a raise to switch over.
Wow.
And so I look at it and I was like, man, in reality, like she went somewhere else and worked and kept, but it was like this company that she had been a part of, she should have been able to continue climbing the ladder. I had a friend that in that same company, he was in a kind of an IT position, almost like a tech, for the machines that ran the chemical plants. And he went and got a accounting degree. Right? And he wanted to stay with the same company and take a job that was open to now use his degree they read, and they did not want to allow him to switch over. And what I started seeing is that, yes, there's something to be gained from the rigors of sticking to something and getting a degree. My college professors told me, they said, hey, whatever job you go to, they're going to train you how to do it. But the degree that you get is just kind of your entrance into the door, and then two, it teaches you how to problem solve. That's what I'm here to teach you, is how to problem solve. And it changed my mind of how I thought about my degree. But I saw how the degree was being used as a gatekeeper rather than a way maker for so many careers, because you had people who were doing the work already who were not being given the opportunities. Like that guy who was doing the tech stuff and working on the code, he knew more than most new engineers coming in doing process technology, and he could do all their jobs. But they wouldn't promote him because he didn't have the degree, when in actuality, he would have been more efficient of a hire. And I think this article, this tweet, gets at some of that, of how we use some hardline measures sometimes as a way of just keeping people that we don't want out of certain positions.
Now, John, You know, I often like to play devil's advocate,
But the devil don't need no help.
which is why in this case I'm not playing devil's advocate. I think this is great. I think this is great. And here's one of the reasons. I think that degrees in many cases have actually hindered people from learning what they need to learn in order to work on their jobs. My wife is from a small town just north of Topeka. Growing up, she worked for like a food processing plant for like dog food and different things like that. And they did stuff with tractors and with like all the farmers and things out there. And she pretty much did like the accounting for the company. She was pretty much doing the CPA job there. Like had no accounting degree. She goes to school for accounting and she gets into her classes and she was like, hey, I do this job. None of this makes any sense. None of the stuff in this book, like the way that you're doing it, this isn't how I do it on my job. And they're like, yeah, no, I know. That's not how you're actually going to do it in accounting. But you got to learn it this way to get the grades. And she was like, I'm unlearning the experience that I've had to do that. Not only that, I think there was a point in time in America where we stressed getting degrees and we wanted people to go and the education was the gateway and that was important. But for one, those times have changed. And for two, we saw an issue early on in this transition where as people would get these degrees, they would try and go into their field of study and they would be lacking the E word, which is what employers were often looking for, which was experience.
Yep.
Why didn't they have the experience? Because they spent all their time trying to get the degree.
And that's why I stress to so many college students, do not come home and just get fast food jobs. Get an internship. I always try to say that. Even right now, you know, we're partnering with the Topeka Way to Work program. And I keep saying like, yeah, you can go get a higher paying job somewhere, but are you going to get the professional development that you're going to get as a part of the job? Right. I'll tell you this. One of my jobs is a pastor. And I remember going to Bible college and then the seminary and being in seminary classes, they have classes on preaching, which, man, I remember taking public speaking in high school and stuff like that. All those classes are really, really great to help improve your skills. But the way it was presented sometimes is, this is the only way or the best way to speak. Well, right. I was a part of an African-American church, which like they were like, hey,
every week speaking class.
You should never, well, or it is, they were like, well, when you preach, you should never touch the lectern. You should never do this. And I'm like, a part of our tradition has always been this. And I know in your tradition, you may do that or not do these certain things, but that don't make it right. They just make it one way of doing things. And it doesn't make you not a effective communicator. It just means that we communicate differently. And I can remember a church asking me to come speak, and because I didn't speak like their speaking team, they're like, you know, and I'm like, no, I've always been an effective communicator. Mm-hmm. I just don't fit your mold.
Right.
And so, and if I would have tried to take and squeeze into that mold that they were teaching in that, and come back into the context in which I was actually ministering, I would have started being ineffective. And so I look at that, and so sometimes we look at that where, for instance, in ministry, African Americans, for the longest amount of time, didn't have access to seminaries. The seminary I graduated from, Dr. Tony Evans was the first African American graduate of that seminary. And professors had to put their jobs on the line for that to happen. And so we didn't have access. But when you look at when the Bible Society does their annual survey, the African American church is the truest to the scriptures of any traditional, tradition in America.
Right, in America.
So, I mean, so you look at that, right? You can get uppity on that degree and overlook your grandma and grandpa who didn't have the same learning, but were really effective at being able to teach and share the scriptures. In the same way, a lot of these tech companies were started by people who didn't graduate college. Mm-hmm. And we celebrate them. But then we hold it against everyone who doesn't have a college degree.
Yeah, and we draw hard lines and we ignore practicality. People do this with scripture all the time, and I'm not going to go down that road right now, but it's drawing hard lines and ignoring practicality. For instance, I think colleges should look at this as well. Washburn recently, within the last 4 years, started taking out some of their requirements around ACT scores.
They're putting, all these colleges are bringing it back. I don't know if you've seen that. Now, a lot of these colleges took it out and they're bringing it back.
Yeah, and it's silly though because I thought for the same reason that this was, I'm like, hey, you're opening up the gates. People who can't cut the mustard won't cut the mustard. Like let them through. And so like look at
Yeah.
the way that like Berkeley. Berkeley has there's so many like star graduates of Berkeley, but most of them never got a degree from Berkeley. They get an honorary degree because Berkeley is an industry. Berkeley College of Music is an industry school. So people will come into Berkeley. They'll go to Berkeley. They'll learn a few things in their classes that'll help them get gigs. And then they're like, "Hey, I'm the drummer for Beyonce now. I need to quit school." They're like, "Cool. You go ahead, go win your first Grammy, and we'll give you an honorary degree." Because the whole point of this college was to help you excel in this
But
field.
let me
If you're
tell you this.
excelling in the field, then you don't need a degree for
Bro,
this.
most people I went to high school with would tell, and this is, I hope this is heard in the right light, would tell you, I was a pretty intelligent person. I was voted by my class most intelligent. I was voted by my class most intelligent as the male. And like, and
That's funny.
I made a 1050 on my SAT. I didn't make a super high because here's the deal. I took my SAT the morning after, the Saturday morning after a late Friday night football game that I played. And I got up early the next morning to go take the SAT. I knew I needed a minimal score to get into college. My only goal, I didn't take any practice tests. I didn't study for anything. I didn't ride for nothing. No prep at all for my SAT. I rolled in sleepy out of bed instead of going to practice that morning and took my SAT because my coach told me I had to. And when I found out I made the minimum score to get in, that was my only goal.
Good.
I was out.
I'm out. I'm done.
If you would have judged my intelligence based on that SAT score that I cared nothing about. Now, later on, I took that, the very first opportunity I could.
Probably like your sophomore, junior year or something.
Yeah,
like that.
very first opportunity I could, and I never took it again. They were like, you should take it again. Like, I have no interest in taking that test again.
Got what I need.
Now, I passed my EIT, my engineering training test, the first time. Took it, passed it. 8-hour long test that tests everything you've ever learned in your whole academic career. Took it, right? Was ready for it. Scored really well on it. And it's one of those deals where sometimes it doesn't match up and it
We're
doesn't
not
tell
testing
you
the right thing.
it doesn't tell you everything, right?
No.
And so I understand that, and I'm like, I only made like a 1050 on that joke. I had a lot of friends that took all these practice, that made higher scores, different things of that nature.
And here's the thing, like, man, when I was 14, a cousin of my family, he had married into my family. I used to hate people that married into my family, so I was real standoffish against him. Found out I did music. He was an engineering student at University of Michigan, and had dropped out and started his own record label. He asked me to come over his house. I came over his house. He started showing me how to record, doing different things. I was recording on a tape deck. I had a karaoke machine, was flipping the tapes, was recording into the keyboard and stuff. He was like, man, we're going to get you off of that and we're going to put you on some real equipment. Show me how to read contracts. Show me how to do. And so I did all that type of stuff. I was 14 years old. By the time I got to college, I had recorded my first mixtape and made my first album my 9th grade year of college. Now, when I went to college, we studied classical music. So I didn't know anything about classical music. So everybody was like, oh, okay, you just hear little black dudes just here, right? Yeah. And didn't really respect my musicianship. But as things went on, they realized like, oh, you got a lot of skills. Where did you learn this stuff? I'm like, church, and from this rapper guy that teaches me. And it was time and experience with people who were good at what they did. I ended up becoming the guest choir director and conductor for the Washburn Symphony Orchestra. Like, because I had all of these skills that I just grew up around people in that space, and people really undervalue being in community with people who have high skills.
So we talk about this all the time because we're on staff at the same church.
Yeah.
I grew up in church choirs. I also were in school choirs, right? And in school choir, we learned sight reading and all those things for solo and ensemble, for all those other deals that we're a part of, right? I played like 1 year of alto sax. You learned all those things, right? And you laugh because people are like, oh, I need sheet music or whatever else. And I'm like, in the church choir, they would be like, hey, play sound booth, play that song. We all would listen to our parts,
and then go sing it.
and then we would sing it.
Go do it.
We would sing our parts.
Yep, that's it.
We didn't have any
That's it.
sheet music. You had to write down the words yourself as you heard the song played over
We
the
didn't
speakers.
have no screens up.
We didn't have no screens. We didn't have any of that stuff, man. And like maybe you had the CD throughout the week and you would listen to it and you would sing your part. That's how you would practice throughout the week. And the musician who was leading the church and teaching didn't know how to read. Like he or she learned by listening to the song and then just playing what they hear by listening, learning by ear, being able to play by ear, right? Didn't have all those degrees. I remember being in the school choir in elementary, and at that time my dad was married, and my stepmom was the church musician. And then I was in a choir in my elementary school, and my elementary school music teacher was like, man, your stepmom plays for church? I can't play gospel music. But she taught music at a school, and she could she could play all the songs and doe, deer, female deer. She could play all those songs, like the classical stuff.
All the classical stuff, yeah.
But she could not play the other stuff. And there was a divide, right? And my stepmom wasn't reading music and different things of that nature. So it's just, there's a divide that happens, and sometimes we neglect to see how that experience and some of those other things, you can gain what's needed to be effective without a degree sometimes.
And I think it goes back to what you said, what you were saying there, and what you said when we started this conversation is, are you an effective communicator, right? You talked about that, being effective. One thing I loved about going to college for music, and I really didn't learn it till I went to Berkeley, but they taught me jazz theory. And why I like jazz theory, for one, I'm a good teacher, so I can standardize almost anything. And so when I heard it, I was like, oh, this is a language that I can use to help anyone improve faster, to where we can get on the same page. And I feel like that's what institutions should be for, is to help us get on the same page. If I'm in a field where the best way for me to learn how to do this is to go to tech school, then that's where I want to go, because I want to know how to speak the language, right? If it's coding, you can learn coding without going to school. Music, you can learn music without going to school. There are all sorts of ways, but it's like, can you speak the language? And even if you're choosing whether or not to get the degree, you have to be looking critically and going, am I actually learning what I'm going to need to speak the language where I'm going? And if not, I may need to make a shift.
So here's the one benefit. I went to University of Tulsa, small school, kind of liberal arts, heavy focus. And there, in your freshman English class, you have to write your normal papers. But you have to do this thing where you have to take some of your best papers, an impromptu class paper, and then you have to turn those in to the rest of the English professors that are not your English professor. And they have to grade it. And if they don't grade it high enough, you have to retake that English course. And so it's really high on you being able to have clear English communication. In my calculus classes, in my differential equation classes, Calc 1, 2, 3, differential equations, all those, we had to do projects where we had to write papers, and they graded on your use of the English language. And at first, I was like, this is craziness. I'm going to be an engineer. This is not important. On this side of things, I am so thankful for that, because I come across so many people who cannot write a coherent paragraph. And they cannot communicate. And so some of the deals of why I feel like college is needed, or some kind of schooling is needed, is because people can't effectively communicate. And I don't care what you do, whether you serving fries at McDonald's or whatever else, you need to be able to effectively communicate. If you're the manager, you need to be able to effectively communicate. And I think that is where the breakdown is there's going to be some skills that you need. Also, problem-solving skills. I believe and it's not something that is a gift. It is something that is a skill that you need. Leadership skills,
It's like the soft skills of education.
Oh,
We talk
man.
about soft skills and
Man.
like, okay, how do I communicate? How do I come into an interview? And there's soft skills of education too. Things that are the byproduct
Yes.
of intently studying and being in somewhere that may not have anything to do with the actual topic of study, but that are a result of dedicating
And
yourself
teach you how to
study.
think.
Yep.
That so I think that is the real value of education, is teaching you how to think, and especially within the space of teaching you how to think. And I feel like that's the highest value, because when you get to an individual company, they all have their own ways of doing things, and so you have to relearn so much anyway. And so if you can learn, which
You are
we're living in a
valuable.
society that really learns everything through YouTube and everything else. We are a self-taught society in so many ways, right? So a lot of times that's not the what is not what gets us in trouble. Is figuring out the why and the how and understanding those, and then being able to communicate it clearly. That is what gets us in trouble in our organizations a lot of times.
Yeah. So what do y'all think, man? Should they be dropping degrees? Should we be bringing these standards back? Or is there somewhere in between that we really need to be looking at? Man, we want to hear from you guys. Write down in the comments. Share this with somebody and get their opinion on it and share it with us. Man, like and do all of those things. And we'll see you next week
In the intersection.